Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sirius Report. Well, Paul, President Trump is once again making wild threats and quote unquote promises towards Russia over Ukraine. But unfortunately, it also is containing rhetoric that risks full on escalation.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably the worst part of all this is Trump's perspective now on the Ukraine war is really driven by his anger at Putin because he refused to acquiesce to his demands to end the war. And he takes this personally. And, when your policies, initiatives are driven by, well, and I would absolutely say this, fears or feelings of rejection by Putin, it's disastrous. So, in essence, what happens with regards to Trump is he looks at a situation and goes, I would need to end this war. I need to be the person who can then in history go, I told Putin to end the war and he did as he was told. Look at me, look how strong I am. And look, I stopped the war, so I should get a Nobel Peace Prize. So what happens every few weeks? The US comes up with another plan to end the war. So the US can look like a peacemaker, even though the US was responsible for the proxy war in the first place. And then Trump will get his Nobel Peace Prize. And then Russia stands there and says, look, we've had all these conversations. We'll end the war when our core issues are addressed. And we've said them so many times you don't need to repeat them, but that's demilitarization, no NATO membership, neutrality, etc. Well, you've known this. We've said this for 3 years. None of this is a mystery or a secret. I mean, and this is just this repetitive cycle. So every time this new plan comes up, it sounds more threatening, even if Russia doesn't take it seriously. But it does risk a massive escalation that could cause huge problems if anything, and there are statements made, and then the White House denies them, and we'll come on to that shortly. Uh, but in the end, you know, the basic bottom line is Russia's made its position abundantly clear. So the US can keep coming back, trying to find another way to they think is going to drive fear into the Russians, which of course it won't, and make them go, okay, yeah, let's end the war, and we'll won't end it on the terms we've insisted. We have to end the war. And can you imagine the Russian people if they just backed off now? People talk about Putin and his presidency. I would argue his presidency could be under threat if he backed away after 3.5 years of a war by just getting some watered down version of what the whole point of going to war in the first place was supposed to be about. And that's, you know, as an initial point, I think is where I'll pass over to you, Ken, and then we can get into the detail a bit more. But that's the basic bottom line. And it all relates to the fact that Putin just, as Trump says, well, he's very polite, he's very chatty, he listens, and then he totally ignores us. And that's rejection. And I just don't think Trump can handle a rejection because it makes Trump look weak. And Trump wants to come out of this looking like the strong man, like, look, I did it. I did it what no other leader could do. I tamed Putin. I ended the war. And then it's I need a Nobel Peace Prize because that's again, it's accolades. Trump just wants accolades. But in the process, he's actually sounding more and more desperate and making more and more ridiculous statements that do ultimately threaten to risk an escalation. And we'll come on to the claims which have been denied. If there's any truth in this, and I don't care whether the White House rejects them, I'm not sure I trust the White House with regards to anything. And we're not going to get into the whole subject of this Epstein client list, but after what happened with that, sorry, but I think anybody who trusts an ounce of anything that comes out of the White House now needs to seriously review their perspective on those things.
Yeah, one thing I find kind of interesting, and it's tied to two different issues here. There was a tweet that was sent out by Medvedev earlier today that really speaks on how much they understand what Trump and Trump's policies have been in regards to the Ukraine. He typed, Trump issued a theatrical ultimatum to the Kremlin, which, of course, is not the first time he's done that. The world shuddered, expecting the consequences. Belligerent Europe was disappointed, and Russia didn't care. And the reason I say this is because going back to July 9th, there was an article that talked about Putin is pushing ahead with Ukraine with renewed intensity despite Trump's sharp criticism in recent days. So I think the reality is that Russia is they are convicted in what they need to do to accomplish their goals in the from the initial SMO that they haven't wavered from the beginning. And no matter what Trump decides to do, whether through threats, belligerence, or promises, and because if you take a look at what he did, he's giving him a 50-day window. In my opinion, that's like what he's been doing by moving the goalposts in regards to the tariffs. He's making a threat. He's taking the short-term victory, look how strong I am, and then not have to deal with the situation for another 2 months and push it to the back burner. And I think that's exactly in the reality what he's trying to do here. Now, 2 months from now, or what's going on behind the scenes, that to me has more importance than what we're seeing in the public spectrum.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just to put a bit of meat on the bone, Trump basically said, we're going to send more Patriot batteries to Ukraine. But then he said they're being paid for by the Europeans. And then, made a big thing as though, look, I'm selling these to Europe. I mean, what Europe is playing at? Europe should just say to Trump, if you want to send batteries, send them yourself. But I think the reality is they're going to have to use existing stock because which Europe's got because in essence the United States can't send any more Patriot batteries to Ukraine. They don't have them. They can't manufacture them. So therefore they're just saying to Europe, right, you just send what you've got, whatever that is, and then we'll reimburse you with these, but we're going to make it look like Europe paid for them. Well, there's going to be a big question in the future as to did Europe pay for them or didn't they? But anyway, so, and if Europe's obviously would have to buy new Patriot batteries for Ukraine, that how long is that going to take? 6 months? A year? We don't know. The other question is there's a lot of debate over what Patriot batteries Europe's got. A lot of sort of statements made where 1 minute Germany's got this many, then it's less. And the question is already countries are going, well, it'll take us several months for you to receive them. So in essence, this is just hotter. And to be honest, that's probably why Russia just doesn't care about this statement. And the argument is, well, you can send more Patriots or Patriot interceptor missile, and we'll just destroy them anyway. And yeah, Trump gave Russia 50 days to make a peace deal, or what? And he'll impose 100% additional tariff on Russia. Well, Russia will go, fine, you're not going to have your heavy oil, which you need for diesel, for jet fuel, for bunker fuel, and you won't get your uranium either. So how quickly before the United States is plunged into darkness because it doesn't have enriched uranium. I mean, no thought given to this. And the Russians, again, just were looking at this going, this is ridiculous. And then there was supposed to be some sanctions package which would authorize Trump to levy a 500% import tariff on countries that import Russian fossil fuels. Well, I'm sure China, India, etc. are just going to turn around and go, this is absolutely ludicrous. And I mean, and also the question is that applies to China. Well, was it not the situation that Trump initially tried to set an import tariff on China at 145%, realized that the United States could then export nothing to China, then panicked and backed off as usual, then negotiated it down to 30, but now we're going to apply 500% on China. Well, if that's the case, then China will do likewise and go, oh, sorry, You're not exporting anything to us anymore anyway. If it didn't work at 145, it's not going to work at 500%. So Ukraine gets some kind of replacement of the Patriot missile defense systems that are being destroyed. It's unclear, does Europe get an order, meaning in 2 years they'll get replacements? We don't know how many Europe's got, and that's supposed to be in a major announcement along with these ridiculous tariffs, because Russia, in theory, could just doesn't export much to the US than what it does. The US desperately needs. So therefore they wouldn't get any of it. I mean, then there was claims that delivery of Patriot systems and missiles to Ukraine are going to be postponed. They're not going to be available for sale in the near future because the US has got massive shortages itself. So, there'll be no direct deliveries. Weapons would have to go through third-party countries. I mean, so the third-party countries transfer its weapons to Ukraine. I mean, who's going to partake in that? Well, it's debatable. How many have they got? Nobody knows. How long is it going to take? No one knows. And this was supposed to be this major announcement. So no wonder Russia's looking at this going, we don't care. This is all kind of irrelevant. But what's more concerning is statements that have been made. The Trump administration's denied them, or the White House came out and said they're not true. Well, and okay, let's work on the basis they are, but what happens if they were just a typical Trump throwaway remark, which actually then could embolden the Ukrainians in ridiculous ways that could also cause an escalation? And one point that was made, and there was claims that Trump had considered sending Ukraine Tomahawk cruise missile, which could reach Moscow and St. Petersburg, but then he decided not to. I mean, and they're not going to be sent, but they could be deployed later if Trump wants more leverage. So what this means is if Trump continues to feel humiliated or ignored or whatever it is, then he's going to up the ante even more. So then what does he do? Go, I'm going to send Tomahawk cruise missiles. Well, that's full on escalation as far as Russia's concerned. And then there was talk about sending more ATACMS missiles or allowing them to be used. I don't think there was many of them left. And they'll be chewed up in a day or two. And then there was supposed to be military aid packages to the tune of billions of dollars. But again, is this reality? So clearly, Trump's escalation is because Putin disrespects him as far as Trump's concerned. I mean, there are claims as well that because Trump saw how effective US military power was against Iran, which of course it wasn't in the B-2 bombers, that, oh, wow, we can now utilize this as leverage against Russia. Russia, the biggest nuclear power in the world. Is this guy serious? Well, apparently he is. And the belief that the way to get Putin to negotiate, we have to threaten even greater force. Really? Against the biggest nuclear power in the world? Is he serious? And this is the problem. He's allowing his sensibilities, because he's been offended, to now make him go, well, I'm desperate to win. So in order to win, I am going to threaten greater force. So probably the story that was leaked about the Tomahawks probably had a kernel of truth in it. It's then denied. But I think that's one thing that Russia will take seriously in that aspect. I mean, okay, denial. Well, what's the White House going to do? Come out and say, oh, actually, it's true. We did say that. Of course, they're not going to say that because they don't say that. And then there was the other claim, which has been denied by the White House, that Trump had encouraged Ukraine to maybe have deeper strikes into Russian territory and asked, apparently the claim was he asked Zelensky if he could strike Moscow if the US provided long-range weapons. That's been denied, but the claim was the conversation happened the beginning of July. I mean, and this all ties in with, again, Trump feeling as though Putin's leading him on a merry dance. Because the conversation with Zelensky came about because Trump's call with Putin a day earlier was a disaster. Now, okay, there's the denial, but the chronologically the dates would imply potentially that is exactly what happened. I mean, and whether at the end of the day anyone takes Trump seriously or not, but if you actually genuinely said that, even if it's half joking or just some vague reference to something, you don't start making statements to Zelensky like that. So, I mean, the question is, if it's a lie, well, okay, it's a lie. And it wouldn't take much for the United States to pick up the phone and say to the Russians, look, it's nonsense. We never said it, but by all accounts, when this story broke, the White House and Ukraine's presidential office didn't respond to a request to comment on this. So make of that what you will, and frankly, I'm not sure I'd, in any way, shape, or anymore, can trust anything the Trump administration says and then denies. I mean, and the problem is, things happen so frequently now. There can be definitely stories could be made up in the future, and people will start going, well, this is typical Trump, and they'll believe them. So, I mean, and there has been certain elements, certainly in the Beltway, who would love the US to give Ukraine weapons or long-range weapons like Tomahawks that can strike at a range of 1,600 kilometers. I mean, I would be gobsmacked, frankly, if that was to happen. I mean, and I suppose at the end of the day, when Trump's president, everyone's used to him making statements that you wouldn't necessarily attribute to being reality. But, we're talking about a war with a full-on escalation if Tomahawks appear or, any other long-range missiles that could be used to strike Moscow or St. Petersburg. Absolutely ludicrous that if those kind of conversations are happening, even if it's all typical Donald Trump tongue-in-cheek, don't take it too seriously. I'm just going to throw a load of mud and see what sticks and see whether if I throw that comment out, it might panic the Russians enough into backing off, which might be a reason why it could have happened. And then just go, oh, no, we never said that. No, it didn't happen. It wasn't true. But, the Russians at some point might ignore a lot of what Trump says, but they're going to have to start taking seriously those kind of statements. And if initially there's no comment, that would, to me, imply that there might be something in the story because you would immediately come out and go, nonsense, we never said that. No comment is, oops, how's this story broken? Who found out? Oh, so no one wants to talk about it. But if it's something that 100% was not the case, then you just come out and go, this is rubbish, because there wouldn't be any problem. No one would have to think, how do we respond to this? They just come out and go, it's nonsense.
Yeah, you take a look at the fluidity and the learning of this. Putin does have two quote unquote black marks on his record in regards to this conflict. The allowing of Kursk to be taken, not being awake to that, and the other is the uh, deceptive when the train blowing up the bridge, and then the train with the drones coming in and attacking an airfield. That was something he didn't look at. But if this comes out and it's been in the mainstream that the Trump administration at least has been talking about potentially tomahawks instantaneously, in my opinion, they're going to put that into the war game computers and they're going to say, you know what? We need to have a couple of Oreshniks sitting there ready that the moment if it does happen, that 12 minutes later, they're going to be over, say, Ramstein Air Force Base type thing. But that aside, I think one of the there's a few quick points I want to go ahead and make in regards to this. The um, Trump administration in recent days has been doing a number of different things that has really divided his support base, the quote unquote MAGA or those who voted for him. Primarily, obviously, the Epstein. We're not going to get into that, but the one thing that the his supporters did not want is an escalation of conflict. We did not vote for war. We wanted, okay, if you can get Ukraine conflict to go, end and be done with, hey, we'll give you all the kudos in the world. But now, sorry, there.
That's
Now
okay.
you're talking about escalating it. And that is already being discussed on some of the social media platforms. That is not something that a lot of the his supporters are standing by. So he's losing his base. And why is that important? Well, we're coming up within pretty close to the midterms, and he holds a very small edge in both the House and the Senate. And if that switches over, anything that he might want to do going forward for his final 2 years pretty much are just like in 2017, 20, or 2018, 2019, 2020, he's a lame duck president. So there's always that you've got to take a look at. I think the other thing is when it comes to Europe, Europe, we talked about in a previous podcast, the document from the French Parliament. We see in Spain, we see the attempt for him to get the vassals of Australia and Japan. Would you be willing to stand with us if we go after Taiwan? Well, they're all saying no. So he's losing any type of hold that he's had on both Europe and in Southeast Asia. So he's losing that and his ability to pivot towards China. Finally, the last thing I want to take a look at is, I would not be surprised at all if the accuracy of, offering tomahawks and seeing what the outcome and the response would be. The Pentagon war games all the time with these type of scenarios. But I just have to remember what Hegseth said at at a conference or an interview or something, a question and answer session. He said that the Pentagon has war gamed multiple scenarios with China, and in every single instance, we lose. So the United States is really not in any state of being to be able to do any type of conflict that's going to involve them directly. And so I think honestly, this threat, it was probably brought up, like I said, in wargaming and maybe discussed. But if they took a honest look at the warfighting capacity of the United States at this time in relation to Russia, China, or many other areas around the world, they have to realize the stark reality that the United States is not capable and is not ready for that type of conflict.
No, well, we've done podcasts before. Why the US can never go to war with China. It can't go to war with Russia directly. All this proxy stuff was never going to lead to the United States ever being in a position where it was fighting directly with Russia. Now, what I would say is, and I would agree, that I very much doubt in the end if Trump had these conversations, which have been denied, but let's just, for argument's sake, say there was some truth in it, even if it was a throwaway statement. In the end, the Pentagon or whoever will just put their foot down and go, we're not doing this, because then we're going to be directly at war with Russia, and we all know what the consequences of that would be. The problem is with all this is because Trump is so desperate to have a foreign policy victory, so they keep coming up with another scenario where they think they're going to force Putin's hand and he's going to cave in. And then when he doesn't cave in, the humiliation continues. And then Trump wants to try something else and keep trying. And the rhetoric gets turned up a notch. He's now owning the war, which he didn't do previously, by sending aid or sending missiles or whatever he's promising to do. And it's all a bit vague. And the whole issue of the Patriot missile defense systems being a case in point, no one's sure what the heck it actually means. Just shuffling missile defense systems between NATO partners, giving them to Ukraine, whatever, as we've highlighted. But the problem is, if this scenario doesn't pan out and the Patriot missile defense systems don't arrive for about 70, 80, 100 days, whatever it is, so it makes no difference. The war continues. And in 50 days, then what? He's going to put tariffs on Russia, which is meaningless. He'll do nothing. Every time one of these new initiatives comes about, it fails. The US looks weaker and weaker. The humiliation gets worse and worse. And then the problem is, what's then Trump going to do? He's going to have to come up with another scenario and another scenario. And the risk is, in the end, he'll up the ante to the point where it could end up with a full-on escalation. Whilst it's extremely unlikely to happen, and I don't think it will, but where do you draw the line with this? Because Trump wants to win. Trump wants to be the man who I tamed Putin, as we said. I ended the war. Look how great I am. Well, it's not going to happen. So what does he do? Admit defeat, backs off, just licks his wounds and pretends to move on? He can't do that. He's not, or seemingly he's incapable of doing that. So the risk is he could end up in a situation where a policy decision's made that is completely reckless. And in terms of an escalation, it could escalate the SMO into a war, as far as Ukraine's concerned, which would be an utter disaster if that was to happen. So there are a lot of risks in upping the ante, threatening to do things, then actually not ending up doing anything, but coming back and doing it again. Because at some point, the risk is that something could spiral out of control, and it could therefore escalate the war. I'm not suggesting we end up with World War III in any way, shape, or form, because I've always been adamant that will never happen, and I will stand by that. But this could cause major problems. And Europe, ironically, maybe start to look at this and go, this is just too much for us. Even the most die-hard Ukrainian supporting nations will go, this is out of control and we can't support this anymore. This, therefore, could mean Europe just goes, no, that's it, we're drawing a line. And we're not prepared to take the responsibility for the fact we don't know from one day to the next what Trump's going to say or do. But yeah, Medvedev's statement, yeah, holds true. But if there was any kernel of truth to the threats about tomahawks, etc., you can guarantee Russia will not be so jokingly laughing that off. There will have been a phone call from the Russians going, what the hell are you playing at? And that'll be probably then why they'll come out and make a denial. Because that's the end of the day. Trump could say it to Zelensky. But no, everyone will go, oh, it's just Zelensky. And everyone goes, no, Zelensky's making it up, or it never happened. And they can walk away from it. But they might also, in Trump's mind, he might be going, oh, well, I'm throwing some mud against the wall. It might terrify the Russians enough for them to think I'm really going to do it. You don't do that sort of psychological warfare with the nation with the largest number of nuclear weapons on the planet. That's just ridiculous. And someone needs to rein in Trump as a president. Someone needs to take him to one side and go, enough's enough. This has to stop. You can't win the war as far as you're concerned. You're not going to be the peacemaker. All the things you want to happen is not going to happen. Just walk away from it and accept it. But he can't. And, but he made the mistake of saying, I'm going to end the war in 24 hours as one of his presidential promises, which, of course, was never going to happen. But this is what happens when you make statements. People dig holes for themselves, and the risk is he'll dig and keep digging. And the damage it will do to the United States in the process will be enormous. and damage to the very institutions the United States has spent decades trying to preserve.
I absolutely agree. 6 months ago, um, Trump put Zelensky in his place early in his administration. And now, 6 months later, he's coming to Zelensky with open arms, mostly to appease that ego. And unfortunately, it's just going to keep things going longer than they probably should have. Paul, do you have any other comments you want to
No,
add to
no, I
this?
think that's fine. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everybody here at the Sirius Report community, as always, thank you for your support. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, send this out to anybody you think it might be important to. And until the next time we get together, have a great day.